Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. And today I want to just dive right into it with Donovan Dreyer. And I'm so excited about this because the subject matter, first of all, that we're going to talk about, I think is pertinent to so many of my listeners and beyond. But it's at one point or another, I think Donovan's work has touched each and every one of us in some way. We can all relate because Donovan works primarily with teens these days. And we've all been teenagers at some point or another, as far as I know. I don't know. I'm assuming that that's true. That's a truism. But, those of us who have been teens at one point or another, but also those of us who are parents or who work with kids in any way, shape, or form would actually, I think, get a lot of extra value out of this episode. And of course, everybody else who is interested in just hearing a great conversation, keep on listening, please. But here I am, Donovan Dreyer, straight out of Colorado. And I'd like to start off by asking Donovan, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your story and how you ended up working with both executives on one hand and kids on the other, teens?
Yeah, well, I'm sitting in Zingerman's Deli. It's 1992 or 3, I think 93, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I was just meeting with an airline captain for the first time. But the problem was this informational interview. It came all the way at the end of my 5-year journey, not just 4, but 5-year journey to get through college and get my aviation technology degree and a whole bunch of certificates. And in that moment, I realized this guy was born to be a pilot.
Yeah.
And I was born to be something else. So yeah, that was the beginning. And that was the beginning of a road to just say, all right, you know what? In my 20s here, I kind of blew it with college. I'm going to figure out who I am and what I'm here to do. And then if we fast forward a bit, as I realized I should be working with people, both my wife and I, after kind of talking about how her day went, we just both realized, like a lightning bolt, you really need to be working with people. So I started shopping around trying to figure out the informational interview to do it right this time. I figured, I got to go back to school, get a master's degree in something. And then the Columbine shooting happened.
Oh.
And that was like the game changer, I think, in life, in the world. At least it was for me. And I knew this is probably going to go on the back burner in a couple weeks and be off the front page of Newsweek. But I'm not going to let it off of the forefront of my mind. And I'm going to be a school counselor. So I got my master's degree in school counseling. If we fast forward again, you're wearing so many different hats. And ultimately, I realized that one of the biggest solutions for mental health, or the most proactive solutions for mental health, is to actually figure out what we are here to do, like that pilot. And then, like myself, I think I keep getting more right and more right and more right with my career. And right now, I really believe Generation Z could be the greatest generation of all time if we can be way more intentional about setting them up a lot more like that pilot was very early on in life, or like Michael Phelps being a fish in water, so to speak. We really do all have this capability to find what we're here and we're best suited to do. And so that's really what I'm focused in on now. And I actually do work with people that are well beyond the teenage years. For the last couple of years, I've been working with a lot of people in the business coaching realm for Ted McGrath. And so within that area, I've seen that people still haven't got it figured out. Maybe by 40, 50, 60, 70, or even over 80, they're still trying to figure out what to do when they grow up. And I think that's a travesty.
And I'm glad that you brought that up. First, there's a lot to unpack here from what you've been saying. It's what a great journey. First of all, you started out in aviation and had the prescience or the self-awareness in your 20s to know that that wasn't the direction for you, because of maybe the interview that you had was the pinnacle, but I'm sure it wasn't the only moment that you had that thought. But to come to that conclusion before you went down what would have probably been a miserable, unhappy path for you, you learned how to fly and you learned how to do all those things. That's a heck of a commitment to just turn around and pivot from,
Yeah, that was a big pivot. My only hint was maybe a rainy day in Michigan, and I didn't have to go to the airport. And my buddy's like, "Oh man, I don't get to go to the airport and fly today." And I'm thinking, there's something wrong with this picture.
Because you were happy. You should have been happy to go to the airport if you wanted to fly, right?
That's right.
By the way, do you still fly?
I do not. Nope. 1993 was the last time. And, so I did pivot. I pivoted radically and did find out what I was really born to do. And as long as I'm living, I know I'm here to help people not end up in the wrong fit career and actually get in the right fit one.
And that's the other part of what I wanted to unpack from what you said, which is about purpose. We talk about that a lot on this show, about purpose and, not only why we're here, but on a micro level, why do you need to do some of the things you need to do every day, or, why you have the job you have. And then on the macro, of course, why are you here? Which, being certainly far from my teenage years, I still haven't answered that question myself. I find like I'm getting closer to it, Donovan. Like, one of the great benefits or one of the great outcomes of having my podcast, for example, is this realization that creativity is one of my missions in life. Not the mission, it's certainly one of. And that, like, helping others to be creative or being more creative myself, certainly being more creative myself. And, talking with experts across different fields, but talking with people who I generally just think have something really cool to offer and cool to say is like this big spark to this creative bonfire that's always now I'm trying to keep lit. Like those Lord of the Rings scene where the signal fires are lit mountain. Every one of my podcasts is another one of those signal fires, I feel like. So as long as I feel like I'm in this big rush to kind of light my way to something. I mean, it's not a war though. Just that's where the Lord of the Rings metaphor falls apart. But I am very concerned with purpose. And you are, you help people to find that, and you help you had that pivot yourself to try to get there. So can we dig into that a little bit? Like, what do you think are the key elements there? Like, what do you help people to discover about themselves, or what do people need to find out about themselves that you can facilitate that kind of lead to that purpose? And maybe you can start with the teens or actually go wherever you want to. Teens.
You already got my mind percolating and spider senses tingling. So
all right.
I'm wondering if you're an IPTA or an iPad. So I turned like all of those assessments and inventories for personality into basically just 4 ingredients. Mm-hmm. So the 4 ingredients spell out PAID. In the education world, we've got so many acronyms that are pointless and that are just blow my mind up. But we all want to get paid when we grow up. So I was looking at one of the inventories and like, what are the central themes? And I just saw that I could make the letters into PAID. So these ingredients we got an element of us that's a people person, where you got the active person to some degree within us. And this is like on a sliding scale, all of these. You've got ideas person or a creative. So immediately I put I right at the top for you in my mind when you started talking about the creative piece.
At least in an aspirational sense. But go.
Yeah. And then the last one's data. So the data person likes to be structured, organized, just likes to have those constraints and boundaries in life, like the accountants of the world and so on. So, so as you were talking about creative and then you're looking to make these connections with people, I'm putting I at the top for you, P second. And I'm just wondering where the active and the data might fit. And it just gives a really quick and dirty, rough idea. And I was just talking with a new client yesterday about how, as I was doing a PowerPoint with the 5 things that popped up for me back in 1988 or whatever, it was like chef, police officer. There was pilot in there. And then a couple other things that just took me from maybe like a 2 out of 10 on my scale of knowing who I was to like a -5. So I answered like 200 questions and I was worse off and more confused after that inventory because they do give you those specifics and they say, oh, these are some things you could choose from. But it's just like the rough idea is better because now we can see if we start brainstorming ideas or even if a career exists in the future that doesn't even exist yet and we're crafting and creating something that doesn't exist, it's probably going to align with the ingredients that we're made up of. So I think that we have like a puzzle piece. We have these 4 ingredients in some degree, and then you can put them in order. The consonants and vowels are cute to make things spell out something for each person. And then the career does too. So we want to have like a puzzle piece, 2 pieces go together. The puzzle piece goes into its spot in the world.
And I've certainly done my share of assessments. So now I've been sort of micro-assessed here in the last, just in 5 minutes.
Right.
And I love it. I'm going to write that down that I might be an IPTA. I think that might be right. Only because I can say it. Although iPad does have a ring to it. I don't know why.
I think it might be something else too out there.
What's the active part again? What would that be?
Yeah, so
What
an
would be an
active
example?
person, there's a kid I'm working with that's super athletic, and he likes to be outdoors, taking pictures, seeing, going on nature trips and being super into sports. So it's that active person, somebody who's really gifted with their hands, like, oh, how'd they learn to juggle so quick? So, it's somebody who's really active, they've got good like kinesthetic body awareness, and that type of person that likes to just
I see. Well, consulting my trophy room of our participation awards, I think that for all my sports when I was younger, I'm definitely, the A would probably be last for me, even though I know it's not just sports, but I don't mind sitting at the desk. I do have to be active, of course, being, of a certain age, but
right.
But let's just say that I'm an IPTA person. Now, being with ideas and people at the top, that sounds 100% right to me. So I wonder if there's like another I for intuitive, which is probably, a double IP for you there, Donovan. But I think, how would that then track into a career, or like in the work that you do? What's the connections?
Well, the nice thing is you can start brainstorming from a place of not wondering how the heck chef, pilot, police officer, accountant, and whatever the fifth thing was that made me confused. You can start brainstorming things and then say, okay, through the lens of who I am, does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I had a kid say, oh, I want to be an accountant. I was like, okay, you got D at the bottom. Like you said to write it on the floor with my marker if I could, because I had a whiteboard. I didn't write it on the floor, of course, but we put it at the bottom of the whiteboard. So why do you say accountant? And he's like, well, my aunt's an accountant and my dad's an accountant. I'm totally going to get a job there easily. Mm-hmm. I was like, and you'll probably hate Mondays. Mm-hmm. Because yes, you'll get the job easy, but this is a thing that you wanted me to write on the floor. This is all about the data and all about structure and fitting in those constraints and in those little boxes. Oh yeah, I don't want that. I don't want that. It's like, oh, well, there's some kind of misalignment there between what you're thinking you could do versus what fits you.
Well, how much does that change from the teenage years onward? Because so that kid likes the idea of being an accountant, I suppose, from the stability it grants his family and from the money maybe that he sees his relatives get. And that there's anything wrong with being an accountant, because, full disclosure, I used to work for an accounting organization. I have a soft spot in my heart for accountants because, I think they're misperceived as a group of people. But regardless, this kid had, based on his assessment, he was really low on the data stream. But how likely is that to change as they get older, based on your work?
I think we look at the even way before, personality assessments. I think people have, been trying to answer these questions. Like my 3 kids are a good example. Like you could see from day one, not day one, but very, very early on, that they're not the same thing. And they're not going to do like the Hollywood trading places with each other, like happens in the movies, and mom's the daughter and daughter's the mom. That's just not going to happen. So I think more right is what we can aspire to. So if we get a rough idea in 5 minutes, and that's just super easy to find, and we know, I guess that iPad or that IPTA, that pretty much matches with the other 25 assessments I've taken now that I think about it. I think we kind of are in the ballpark of who we are from the get-go. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of depends. Yeah. We could have traumas that change that up. We could be born in Africa instead of somewhere else. So there's a lot of things that could kind of conform and condition that. And I think when I looked at a recent, number of like who's in the right fit career and wrong fit career, it was like 85% where people are in the wrong fit career. So we want to conform and, become the round peg or the square peg and just fit into, a place that's going to just be easier. It's harder to do this work and figure out who we are and to pivot if you just spent thousands of dollars and 5 years of your life going in one direction to pivot. But I think that's then the genesis of me really saying, okay, there's really something here. If I actually dig in and make a teachable moment out of those 5 years, I think this is what I was really here to do, is help people figure out what they're here to do.
You said something that's really, really perked my ears up a little bit, which is the idea of the wrong fit career. We're Gen Xers, right? I mean, for us, I think Gen Xers might be, and again, I don't like to necessarily generalize based on a particular age group, But there are certain traits that we can agree that are sort of, prevalent among our age group. And that is for Gen Xers, I think we might be the first generation to just say, there's no such thing as a career. There's just like, many careers or many jobs or many kind of things that I want to be doing and focus on those and see where that takes me for the next 5 years or 7 years or whatever. Now, of course, there's plenty of people who are just like, no, I want to be a plumber. That's it. I'm good. Or I want to be a carpenter. I want to be a lawyer, whatever. And, hey, good for them. They have a career. They're happy. A pilot, maybe. But for me, I know like I've been very fortunate in having a career in marketing and communications, which has been a really excellent way to kind of hit that creative muscle, right? But I can't help but think though that over the many years I've been, at times going the extra mile to try to force myself into the fit with the role and the job rather than really look for or be in a role or position that fits me perfectly. And it's a shame that I think a lot of people go through that on a day-to-day basis. And I guess that's the degree to which that misalignment is there that kind of just determines, whether or not you're going to be happy or you're going to be at least temporarily happy or satisfied with your role at the time. And so, just to kind of cut forward a little bit, this all sort of been some percolating in my head for a long time, and now speaking with a lot of coaches like you, Donovan, and just people over just very smart folks like you. I mean, I've learned quite a bit in the last 6 or 8 months about the way that we approach our purpose and the way that we approach, I think, our our lot in life, so to speak. And it gets to a point where now now that we're all kind of working at home, a lot of us are working we've separated from the traditional corporate environment for the most part. It's opened up a lot of eyes, right? It's opened up a lot of eyes, opened up a lot of minds to exactly that point. And I know I've gone a long way about to say this, but I think it's opened up a lot of minds and eyes and awareness to the fact that, wait a second, we've been working real hard to fit ourselves into some job, when in fact, it should be the other way around in many cases, as long as we have what it takes to deliver the final goods, right? And maybe that means more entrepreneurship. Maybe that means a whole different set of roles need to be developed, but we're working with a post-industrial kind of, hierarchical, for the most part, almost factory-based corporate system when there is no longer a cookie cutter approach to roles. I mean, one marketing manager is not the same as another, is not the same as another, is not the same as another. So I think we're in the middle of a lot of change is kind of what I want to say there. Tons of change. And what you're doing, I think, is critically important right now to help people understand where purpose fits into all that. If only we can get the companies to kind of see that as well.
Yeah, well, I see people making these pivots too. So if they're in the older category, like not the teenagers, I see people trying to make those pivots and moves. And it's easiest maybe to make it when you're a teenager and you're changing majors or still debating and thinking about it. It's hardest when you're 40, 50, 60, 70. So the idea is, well, let's get this going earlier so people aren't trying to have, like the midlife crisis, force them to then go get something that fits them. Why not get that going intentionally from the get-go? And can we dial it in perfectly and everybody knows, yep, I'm a plumber? Not necessarily. I think there's a very small percentage that are just like, yep, I've wanted to be a veterinarian since I was in the 3rd grade. I'm not changing. And then they become a veterinarian. So the idea for me is like, let's get it right from the start. So we at least get a rough idea of who we are right now. Does it change later? I don't know, maybe. But I don't think it's going to be like Hollywood where we do this shape shift and, trade places and we're radically different.
Yeah.
So if we kind of ballpark it at first and get a good rough idea, then we can get more right, and more right. And for me, sometimes I'm taking a position to learn something. And even if I didn't take it to learn X, but I fell on my face, that failure I now know is something we don't do enough of. So we can fail forward more. And we don't need to just, conform, fit to the rubric, fit to what the teacher or the boss says. we can actually go ahead and experiment, fall on our face, and we might actually get a bonus lesson learned from a teachable moment of life.
That concept of fail forward is also something I've been playing around with these days. And I talk about it sometimes in the scope of creativity, where there's no failure. There's no such thing as a failure, really. I mean, every failed idea should have a learning or a teaching associated with it. So there's a success to be drawn out of that. The whole, I guess, lemonade out of lemons thing, writ large. But I look at my daughters, right? And we talked about this, I think, on our first call, Donovan, but I have 2 teenage daughters, which puts me in this exact spot of the type of people that you work with. And they're gonna kill me for talking about some of this stuff, but I'm not gonna get too descriptive. But look, my daughters are incredible people, right? They're 14 and 16, right? They're right in the zone, and they're very different people, each one, but they get along great these days. Maybe the lockdown has been really good for them in that sense. But they get along great. They're both incredibly smart. One of them is far better performer in academics than the other, but they're both, they put their mind to whatever they want to do, they can do, of course. And I like to say that. Maybe I'm biased. But the whole idea of failing forward, I think that it's hard to teach them or show them that that's okay. And I don't get the sense that they're getting that in school or in the school systems. Like, it's still a kind of a pressure cooker of getting grades or passing or, doing certain things, so that the idea of being able to fail, I don't have insight into what their individual classes are doing every day and what their teachers are saying on a day-to-day basis. When the test time comes, obviously you're not being encouraged to fail a test, but it seems to me that they're coming out of the traditional academic environment being very, very averse to failure and afraid of failure in many ways. And to me, that seems like it's reflective of my own experience when I was a kid. So, and I know that I'm here pushing 50 and, I'm hitting that, facing that demon a little bit. I have been for years, but definitely right now, where it's like, no, it's okay. Just do that thing and get it wrong, and then you'll get it right, figure it out. But it's hard to get the kids to kind of follow that. So what do you see in your life, in your work these days that kind of feeds into that, or that, am I off? Am I right? Or is there, what's going on there?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the real world just got a whole lot more real, in this last year. We weren't really matching and aligning with where the overall world was heading before. So kids were not coming out ready for the real world, nor were they being received well either. So it's like not a one-way street of, oh, these kids aren't ready for the real world. It's a two-way street. Like, how are you bringing them in to make your place attractive so that you'll actually have some good retention at wherever you're, bringing people in? Do they feel like they have some autonomy and they can actually create their role? Or do you just like put the thumb on them and tell them what to do? So I think when the real world got a whole lot more real, I think we also have some new perspective. Like, there were so many things we took for granted. And, even our sister, we're getting along better with our sister now. That's, maybe a function of the lockdown. So there's some good that's come out of it. I mean, I also wondered, with this generation, I've seen people start texting back in the early 2000s and the kids would be in trouble for it. But then like the grownups got hooked on the phone. And I was like, well, this is no good, because we've only got one generation in history that's going to be the digital immigrants left on the planet. And that's everybody that's here now that was here before all this technology, before the internet. So right here, right now, we've got this golden opportunity to infuse these lessons within the lockdown, within this time that the kids weren't going to get otherwise. The screens were just going to maybe slowly seep in. But now they actually miss their friends. They actually value this in-person connection. So there's so many things that are happening all at once that there's no way the battleship of our school system could keep up with that. And we're trying. Like, there's so many teachers trying to do so many cutting edge things. But basically, you got quizzes and tests. You got standards that kids are supposed to meet to. And some of those are basic. We need the basics of being able to communicate and do math and so on. But not everybody needs them for 13 years. And what I'm finding is that as much as the world is changing, we are not having enough conversation with kids to help them actually get out into this real world that just got more real at all compared to what we really need to. So,
Yeah.
at the high school level, a counselor might catch a kid, 1 hour freshman year, 1 hour sophomore year, 1 hour junior year in a classroom, and then maybe a sit down for 30 minutes or 45 minutes senior year, and then off you go to see if you can figure it out. So yeah, we need to definitely do a lot more.
And again, I mean, every time you say something, I'm like, there's more in there. I got to pick on something, and not pick on it in a negative way. There's something there that really jumps out at me.
To unpack, yeah.
Obviously, the system isn't set up for kids to learn the proper value of failure is something that, we mentioned a little earlier. And tying that into them being digital natives a little bit, the pressure, I think everything is accelerated. So failure, just like for adults, the digital world allows us to fail and correct and course correct very quickly when it comes to like things that we can physically take care of. Whether it's an assignment you have to do or writing something, or if it's a personal relationship, that's a totally different story, I think. Let's put that aside. But for everything that's digital that kids need to kind of cope with on a day-to-day basis, whether to get to their career, to get to their direction in life and their purpose, there's a lot more, I think, tolerance in the tools that they use, meaning the phones and the digital and all that stuff, for quick failure and quick correction. For them to be able to grasp that that's what they're doing, or they should be doing that, is something that I think is missing, because it's been missing from our adult side of things as well. But that sort of, all that being maybe the case or not, it's just my opinion. You talked about texting and about phones, right? I know this is a particular, specialty area of yours, or maybe a bugaboo. I don't know. But I would be remiss if I let this go. What is it with teenagers and phones? I mean, I know it is their conversation tool. It is their and smartphones. I mean, it is their way of connecting with one another. I get that, having two of them myself. But what can we do about this? The texting especially, and or at least using certain apps to be communicating with their friends, the Snapchat and and TikTok and all these other things. So where's your head on this, Donovan? Like, what do you think is happening here?
Well, I mean, the first thing I heard about it chemically, and I fixed his acronym. It's Edso from Simon Sinek. And so if you fix Edso, this is chemicals. So it's like DOSE. You should do dose, not Edso. So if you use it dose, right. It's dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So we're hardwired chemically to have the chemicals move us. And so dopamine is the quick hit when you accomplish a goal. And so the games and the apps are set up for this. And so the phone has like the built-in dopamine hits, and the oxytocin and serotonin and endorphins, that comes from other natural human stuff. So we need to get this dose right, so the phones are designed in a way that we're just getting too much of the dopamine. And so it can become very addictive. And that's why I think we, as adults have gotten hooked on it as well, because it's giving us the same kind of excitement and buzz. And so it really is a tool here, though, that I think we've got some serious possibilities. So we've got some tools, I think, in the world that maybe have polluted the world accidentally. We didn't know it was going to do that when we invented cars, when we couldn't foresee this many cars or this many, factories running. But with the phone, if we actually embrace some of these tools and we figure out, well, how do we use them wisely? How do we use them in a good way? And instead of just like saying they're categorically bad for you or evil, or they're messing with us chemically, you can work with it. And one of the ways I do that is when I saw kids giving away their username and password with Snapchat to keep their streaks going, I was like, oh, well, when it comes to creating a discipline, boy, a streak sure would be a better way to think about it than you need to develop this discipline or this routine or this good habit. So I actually spun that to say, okay, if people are going to create good habits, let's think about a streak. Let's start something that you need to do day after day after day, and let's see how far you can carry that streak. And so that has more staying power than, let's help you be more disciplined. So that's one way.
It's just taking the gamification, kind of reality of the phone or of the tools that they're using and applying it to the things that we need to teach them on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we have these tools at our disposal right now to reshape education. Actually, I think we've already had an educational revolution and a business revolution in the past 15 to 20 years, because we all can be a professor from our home. And we have been for a long time, where we can just record a webinar and or put a YouTube video out there and teach people how to be a plumber. So these tools that we have at our disposal, I think, can make this world very small. And I think if we use them wisely and start to find ways to, share our wisdom in ways that are actually interesting. So we've got to gamify it. We've got to make it a better experience. We've got to make it so it actually is something fun and engaging. Then we'll actually be able to, maximize the potential on the good side of making this world smaller with the cool tools we have at our disposal to do so.
Yeah. Do you think that the positive aspects of, well, let's just continue down the road of smartphones, because I think it's just a good thing that people understand. But the positive aspects of smartphones and of the apps that kids are using to communicate these days, and not just communicate, but to self-brand. I mean, everybody in Gen Z understands intuitively personal brand. And, that's a thing that I think is a relatively new phenomenon, so they all know that they got to go out there and they have to have their own personal brand, or they should have their own personal brand on whatever platforms that they're using, and for themselves. And it gives them self-esteem, and it gives them certainly it's that old safety net concept that, when I was a kid, you had to have get a license, a teaching license, or this and that, or this and that. That's your safety net in case you don't make it in the corporate world. You have a safety, which is just, by the way, in retrospect, a terrible way to think about things. However, for these kids, right, they're the self-sufficiency and understanding, hey, if I don't do it for myself, there's nobody else going to do it for me. Might be a very Gen Z way to think about things. But that whole idea of building my own personal brand so that I can have the hustle, I can make the money, I can support myself, because who the hell knows about a career anymore, right? But I think that the smartphones, the technology there has enabled all of this and encouraged all of this. And certainly, they're digital natives, so it's been like in their blood, which kind of makes me think that our reaction as parents to this, which is like, you're paying attention to the phone, you're not paying attention to me or to us or to things that are important around you. I know that I've gone down the road too many times of like, okay, turning it off, punishing, right? Which, occasionally it has been a decent hammer to wield, but only when the problem is actually a nail sticking up. I mean, it's not quite as effective as we were led to believe when those apps like Circle and the mobile management software apps have come out to allow us to manage the devices of our children or other people in our household centrally. So we're holding these switches over them, like, it's like the old days of, if you don't do the dishes, you can't talk to your friends on the phone for a month, something like this, from the old phones. So I don't know, what in your experience or in your, understanding of this is a more healthy way or healthier way to be looking at how to integrate the, phone time, the text time, all that stuff into your life or into a healthy family life?
Yeah, well, I think, when we do look at them, we can say, don't do this and don't do that and don't do the other. And so I have Resume 2.0 as one of the steps of my program, and that they should also present themselves as part of what I do in coaching kids. So let's tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would you create your brand? Can you tell your story? What's your origin story of the theme that you have? What's the message you want to get out to the world? What's the problem you want to solve? What's the work you want to do? It's maybe not wrong fit or right fit or career, but is there some problem you want to solve? Is there some work that you really want to get done in this world? So what is that? How can you tell people that? What do you need to do? Where should you present yourself? Is it consistent wherever we find you? So we can actually teach them how to do it. When I got this long-term opportunity I've gotten recently, it was like, it's optional to submit your resume, submit a video. For sure. This is not optional. You have to submit a video. And I thought, well, I'm 50. I was pushing 50 then, But I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I want to experiment, for if nothing else, to see if I could get my first gig without submitting a resume. I'm going to withhold it. It's ready to go, but I'm not going to submit it. It's optional. Let's see if that actually is true. So I put the video in, and I got to the next step and the next step, and turn around 3 years later, and this contractual thing's still rocking and rolling. And this is Resume 2.0. They are making it right now, and they can start gathering their community, their following, their kindred spirits, even. Who really resonates with the same kind of problem they want to solve. And I can do it. I'll do it myself. Like we saw with that shooting in Florida. That's what the kids literally said. Forget you guys. You grown-ups don't care. We don't think you're ever going to care. That's it. We've had it. We're going to do it ourselves. And so we've had people like Malala, and that was like Emma Gonzalez who was saying that in Florida. And we've had Greta out there. So there's kids already starting to make their difference in big ways, using this tool wisely and powerfully. And then they're a kid after that. I see that part too. Okay, next day they are saying something where, that PTSD is kicking in for Emma or whoever. So, or they're just a kid again the next day, and they've got 1 million followers instead of 75 like they did the day before, because they get interviewed on TV and they have their Twitter blow up and whatever other platform blow up. One day they're like saying, hey, forget about it, Generation X, or, all the previous generations, we're going to do it ourselves. But then the next day they're having, something triggered emotionally, and they're having a bad day. So they definitely will still need our wisdom. They'll definitely still need our support. They'll need us to be encouraging and uplifting them and guiding them. We've just got to earn that slot back. We've got to earn that ability and that right to serve them. And, I think that's something that you can't just manufacture that trust out of the blue. We've got to have some serious, genuine care for them.
How does that work on the household level? Without going too far into the kind of things that you are working on too much. But I mean, like, how does that work on a household level where you have parents or a parent or caregiver and kids who just won't leave the phone, and maybe all of their life is on the social network, social media. All of their activity with their friends is through Snapchat and through FaceTime and through text and all these digital avenues. Well, now certainly that's almost certainly the case with the lockdowns that we've had, and it's their way of talking with people, and even the harshest of parents has sort of let the gates down a little bit in this case. But it eats into what we would consider this traditional family lifestyle where, okay, guys, it's something. Let's take something simple. It's time to come down to dinner, and let's all sit down together as a family at dinner. And we in my house, we try to put the phones, and I say try because doesn't always happen, right? But the phones go someplace else during the dinner hour, right? Whether it's 5 feet away or whatever, it's out of sight. So when at the dinner table, there are no phones on the table. I'd say 85% of the time. We're certainly not batting 1,000 on this one, right? But this is something that even if it's for just a half hour, an hour, at least we know that we have some attention. It wasn't always thus, right? But it's just like there's no manual on how to get your teenagers to pay attention, when you're competing with the phone.
Well, I manufacture this manual. Like this is what I do, in 17 years working with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. During the time we went from really no tech in the schools just about to the phones starting to get some serious use in the early 2000s through to now. That's basically it. I'm creating the manual, like social innovation by social innovation on an as needed basis. So, what I've come up for this one is it's just like bedtime or brushing our teeth or salads or exercise. It's just one more of those things that you've got to have some parameters around it. And we used to have minute plans. And so one of the ideas is to have a minute plan and look at you've been on your phone this week, 7 hours per day. That's like we've blown past our minute plan. So you got to figure out what's the minute plan, and then also maybe what time the phone goes to bed. And then, where it's off limits at the table. And then we don't try. I mean, you're talking to a coach here, so you can't be like, pulling my Yoda. You're triggering me on my Yoda button.
There is no try.
The Yoda button's going off like crazy here, Dad. So yeah, we just put some tight parameters and structures around it. What's that?
That's what I was hoping for from you, Donovan. Like a little bit of, a little bit of, hey man, there is no try. There is do. Just do, right?
Yeah, and I'm not any different than any other dad. You know, nobody's batting 1,000 with anything. And we do want to put the structures in place. If we hold to them, it's healthy. If we let them push the envelope, and we're batting like 333, that might get you in the Hall of Fame for baseball, but that's not going to get you in the Hall of Fame of parenting. So we got to bat somewhere close to 1,000 and really hold those parameters and boundaries in place, because those constraints are healthy. The kids might push against them and squawk about them, but those constraints are safety.
Yeah, and you know, it's something else that we talked about earlier that I think this is a really great lead into this, because it causes a whole lot of stress. You know, it is a very stressful. I think we're dealing with more stress these days for obvious reasons, right? This is the strangest and craziest and worst and best sometimes year ever for a lot of people. I mean, terrible things have happened for sure, and you know, we all have to think about that. But at the same time, for my familial relationships and for, you know, self-discovery, it has been a banner year, I think, you know, in this household. And I'm sure there are some others, but it's loaded with stress. And kids are, I want to say that they're 85% of the time, I think 85 is my favorite number these days, but like that percent of the time, they're the source of the stress. You know, it's like they're not coming down to the dinner table. Oh, but actually I know that they're not the source. It's really coming. It's something internal here, but it's stressful. So how can we, you know, what's your way of coping with the stress that comes from, you know, dealing with teens in the household, but also that can be extrapolated to, you know, dealing with professionals in business with each other? Like, what are some of the things that you like to talk about?
Well, this one's definitely a tough one, because I had a mom with a son who had completed suicide in my office one day, and she's like, we have these things here for the last second warning system, like, you know, go talk to the counselor if you're thinking about taking your life, but, you know, how can parents catch it earlier? And I didn't have an answer for her, but I totally set out to get that answer. And so I started to think about a chart, you know, scale of 1 to 10, asking people like, what's that number that you come to the counselor? Problem was the super dramatic kid, it was 0.5. I need to go to the counselor out of 10. And then the other kids that don't want to be seen walking into the counselor office, it's got to be 8 or 9. So the number system between 0.5 and 9 didn't work. And so I thought about just, you know, way before emojis started to get used, with a color system like the green smiley face that I have and the yellow meh face and the frowny face that I started to put on my system. The green, yellow, and red system just puts all of stress into 3 levels. And it's not like just like a scale of temperature like I thought of it at first, but I explained to one guy, like, it's the action taking that matters off of these 3 levels. And he's like, oh, it's like a traffic light. So I pivoted to a traffic light with that iteration. And so your green, if your coping skills cover it, it's healthy stress, and it's within your coping skills. It's your self-help level. Now, if your self-help doesn't do the trick anymore, that's automatically what crosses that yellow line and puts you into that level of your everyday helper that you trust can be there for you and give you some perspective and some support and uplift. And then when those 2 things aren't enough, you can keep doing them. But if those 2 things don't work, that's literally what puts you in that emergency red level where you need emergency attention for your mental health, just like you would with the medical attention. And so I believe our inner state can be kept safe the same way we're kept safe at the intersections. Let's all know exactly what green means, exactly what yellow means, and exactly what red means. And when we're on the intersection on the roads, we all want to make sure we don't smash in the middle. So I've basically created a super, super simple language that allows us not to just rate where we're at with our stress, but exactly what to do and even what not to do. And like a what not to do for parents would be like, hey, this is a green level problem. When you're helicoptering and steamrolling and snow plowing, when you're doing that at the green level, you're actually taking away their opportunity to build that coping skill. or when the kids are wrangling a little bit at the yellow level, they have to work that out together. But if you come in and referee and it's not really necessary, then you're also taking away an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So when we know exactly what level it's at, we know exactly the type of help to give and what not to give. And then so the red story, what not to do, I had a kid that was texting about another friend or to another friend that was, feeling like suicidal. And I was like, that's out of your territory. You're not the trained professional for the professional help. This kid's at the red. Let's get their school counselor in touch with them immediately, call the school, because the kid was at another school. And so this is out of your territory. You don't belong up there in the red because you're not a therapist, counselor, or mental health professional.
Yeah.
So this is out of your territory. So it really is possible then to figure out what to do for every single stress scenario with clarity.
Do you get the kids to kind of agree that, or at least get them to a point of understanding where like, okay, if it goes to this point, then I know I need to go to an adult? Like, is that a product of conversations beforehand, or is that like, how do you get there with the kid? Because sometimes they'll be going back and forth on text.
Yeah, we don't have that language around the planet just yet, but we also don't drive from, Colorado to Florida and have various color lights. We all know it's going to be green, yellow, and red all the way, and we all know what to do at every single intersection. So that universal language, I think, is extremely important for us to get into the mental health realm. And I've done, presentations at the national level, but this is something that's super important. It's mindfulness made easy. So mindfulness is a super nebulous thing. What does it mean? What if I could tell you what my stress level is? Well, when somebody tugs on my shirt at recess, it's probably a yellow level thing that they can go back and work out. And if I go over there and deal with that issue as an adult, I'm stealing away that opportunity for them to wrangle and work things through. If they come again a little more animated, I might want to start to say, okay, why don't you try this or this? Let me give you some tools and equipment so you actually know how to handle it. So really telling kids exactly how to develop those, teaching them to develop coping skills, teaching them to develop conflict resolution with each other, and how to be a supported, trusted friend if it's not a conflict. And then finally, like, hey, this is crossing that line. You got to let an adult know if you're a little kid, or you got to go to the counselor's office if you're a high school kid. So I just think we need that ultra clarity around where we're at inside right now. Everybody on the planet's at one of those three levels right now.
Yeah. And it's not just teens, clearly. This is something
it's everybody in the world's at one of those three levels.
We all need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And it's for the kids, for my kids, I think one of the things that gets me is the lack of real true understanding of what they're talking about, like what is going on in their online, communities and in the circles that they run in. And, there was a point way earlier, a long, long time ago, when they were preteens, when they were just young little kids, that we would very, very carefully watch what they were writing and saying. But, now that they're teenagers, we have to give them a little bit more, I think, independence. Otherwise, we have access to what they do, but we don't pull that lever or even, I don't think we've ever really barged in to see what they're doing without an alarm, So, and there haven't been, thankfully, knock wood, we haven't seen any of those, but it doesn't make it any easier as a parent, certainly as a father of two girls, to know what's going on. You just have to rely on them to be smart kids, which I believe they are. But I can't help but feel that, it's going to be, if this happens, it's going to be in reaction to some sort of an emergency. And I don't want that to happen. I want it to be, I'd like them to be smart and kind of be able to be transparent with me and with their mother, say, this is what's going on. So there's a lot of mystery involved right now with that. Like, I don't know, honestly, what is happening in their, in their chats and their texts. And you know what? I don't think I would know if there wasn't if there weren't any, mobile phones, if there weren't any smartphones, if we were back in the day of regular wired phones, they'd be in their room, quiet, hushing, talking to people, and we wouldn't know what's going on necessarily there either. It's just the volume and the fact that anything that they write or say can then spread like crazy puts a whole new element of danger on it, and an element of, So we try to educate them, help them understand that that's a clear and present danger to everything that they do online, and hopefully that they get that. But, it's still a scary world out there, Donovan. I mean,
It is.
I'm glad that guys like you are out there helping the kids kind of figure it out,
Yeah, well, I think about trust on a trust meter too. I mean, if you've got a reason
Mhm.
to not trust, then there's a reason to kind of go there and dig deeper. But if you're having conversations and curious and the phones are away at the dinner table and they're away at nighttime and you're making enough connections and you don't have your spider senses tingling or your intuition going off on the trust, then trust. That's a great thing for a kid to actually have, is somebody that trusts them until you can't and you have a reason not to.
Until you can't, yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same thing with employee-employer relationships, with any human relationship you have with people, where there's a dynamic of, let's say, a power dynamic or a kind of responsibility dynamic happening there. You have to kind of build these relationships of trust, and it doesn't matter whether it's parent to child or manager to employee. You trust until you can't, half the time. The parameters are clearly different, but the principle seems to be the same to me. And it's great if you can learn that early. It's great if you can learn that early. So Donovan, we're sadly sort of at the end of our journey here today, and I wanted to see if was there any question that I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about? Is there anything else left that you wanted to cover that we didn't get a chance to cover?
Well, I think just like how I work with people is one thing that I can just share as we close here. And I have run a group coaching program once locally here, and I'm looking to actually put it online. I've done a lot of work, as I said, to kind of get a peek behind the wizard's curtain with another coach who is global and has a pretty big international presence. And so for me, it's almost like hoarding or stealing or preventing people from actually having exposure to all this stuff I've amassed in 17 years of high school counseling, 3 years more with the younger kids, and coaching kids as well over the past 4, 5, 6 years. So the way I work with people is either one-on-one or in groups, and it all kind of kicks off with just a free conversation. So I offer that opportunity for people to sit down. I've had, probably anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half conversations with people just to see if this deeper dive support is a right fit. And I can't think of who it's not a right fit for, because we sure have no end to math, science, English, social studies, and foreign language for 13 years. And I do believe the world has gotten a heck of a lot more real, really fast, and that real world readiness is really at the forefront, and kids need real skills for the real world. And that's basically what I provide. So having a good conversation is how I see if people are going to be a great fit for that. So they can get a hold of me through getreadycoaching.com by just getting a free download there on the thing we walked through with your personality assessment. That's available right there on the site to download that, to figure that out for your own kids or yourself. And, basically they can also email me at donovan@getreadycoaching.com as well. And I'd love to help support people through either one-on-one or group coaching. The group coaching is probably going to launch end of January this coming 2021. So I'm excited to work with a group of kids and offer some family parent coaching along with that program. So that's kind of the wrap up, I'd think.
That's terrific, Donovan. And again, you can find Donovan at www.getreadycoaching.com. And I definitely suggest go over there, check out his video, and learn more about what Donovan is doing. Take a look at Donovan's LinkedIn profile. His name will be spelled properly in the episode title, so you can just search for him on LinkedIn as well, which is how I found him. And otherwise, Donovan, this has been a great pleasure. I thank you so much for your time and for coming here and talking to us about teens and about things that really matter, I think, to so many of us. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you, Dan, for having me. I really appreciated the offer to join you on the show, and it was a powerful conversation.
If you enjoyed this episode of The Dan Nessel Show, please head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the podcast player of your choice to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And please don't forget to spread the word. Thanks for listening.